Welcome back to another episode of A Gift from Adversity. My name is Juri. Love. I'm your host. Thank you very much for listening. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to introduce my book, which is called A Gift from Adversity, same title as this podcast, which is available on Amazon. A Gift from Adversity is about my life and my book, and the subtitle is Overcoming Sexual Abuse, Domestic Violence, Bullying, and Homelessness. After I experienced all of this growing up in Japan, I decided to publish this book because I had a lot of speaking jobs and people always asked me, do you have a book? And I didn't. So I decided to publish my book. This book is not only talking about the adversity part of it, but also some of the tools that I used to overcome, and then my experiences of running a nonprofit, and then the message to the victims, perpetrator, and then friends and families around the victims. So check it out, A Gift from Adversity. Before I introduce my guest, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in and learning together and then having this difficult conversation together. So let's invite our guest today. Hi, Suzanne. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me, Juri.
Great. So let's introduce you. Can you tell our audience your name, where you're coming in from today, and what you do, and if you have any website or social media?
Certainly. So my name's Suzanne Culberg. I'm the NOPE coach, as in NOPE, teaching people to say no to others so they can say yes to themselves. I am joining you from the lovely Sydney, Australia, and my website is suzanneculberg.com, which I'll send to you to put in the show notes because the spelling of Culberg always always gets people.
And do you have any Instagram or social media?
Yes, also Suzanne Culberg's Instagram is Suzanne_Culberg, and Facebook is facebook.com/Suzanne Culberg. I'm fortunate to be the only one so far in the world with the name, makes things easy.
So this is episode 89, and I'm very, very grateful that you came in today from Australia. So let's dive into our first question, which is the adversity. So Suzanne, can you tell our audience what was your adversity?
So from a young age, I've struggled with my weight, and my parents had the best intention at the time, but put me on my first diet at age 4. So from age 4 through 30, I was a yo-yo dieter. And my real adversity, though, was bullying. And I linked a lot of that to my weight, like bullied as a result of my weight, but also bullied for, being gifted and just many types of bullying. And I was bullied right from primary school, so as young as I can remember, through high school, through medical school, even a little bit into the workplace. And I guess a lot of people don't really understand the effects that bullying can have, because when you start to speak up for yourself, like, people will be like, I just meant it as a joke. And it's like, it's not a joke to the person who's experiencing that. And I think sometimes bullying is one of the last acceptable forms of adversity, because people can be like, oh, you're just too soft, or you've got a thin skin, and they can kind of get away with it in a way. So yeah, it wasn't pleasant, and it wasn't easy to speak up for myself for a long time.
So the weight part of it and then the bullying part of it, those two different things, but then mainly what kind of things do you think that you remember that hurt you the most in terms of bullying?
So when I was young and I was at school, I remember people, I can't remember what grade I was in. I think it came out in 94, the original Jurassic Park movie, where the water glass moves and that, that the Tyrannosaurus is coming. people would shake their water bottles or shake their glasses and go, oh, here comes the Suzanne, because insinuating that I was that big that the ground was literally shaking. I remember when it came to sports and things, like teams or things to try out for, I remember one teacher once looking me up and down and going, no, you need to be on the lighter side of life. So it was like not being included in things like that. I remember kids following me around going Godzilla and stuff. I remember when I was quite young, some kids saying to me, how many rolls in a bakery? Like, I didn't understand the insult at first. I remember asking my parents about it and then having to explain it and being uncomfortable. I remember when I was at medical school, because I yo-yo dieted, like I was always trying to do something. When we had a halfway graduation and we had this big cake, like for the whole class of like 90 of us. And somehow they got a picture of me next to the cake. And so they posted this in the yearbook, like it's published, you can pick it up and see it, it's available. There's a little thought bubble above my head saying, me so hungry. And then somebody has like photoshopped out the cake with just put like crumbs there and saying, better now. And just all sorts of things. And then like just so many examples, the names, fatty tube sticks and just, yeah, really, really horrible names. And then if I ever said anything, it's like, well, just don't eat so much. Or jokes about like, just have a salad. Salad dodger. That was another thing that I was called, salad dodger. And how it was funny. I remember a teacher once, we did some interview thing, like, you ask questions. And one of the questions was, what do you dislike? And she said, unfit bodies. And I can't remember how I responded to that, because I took it to heart. And sometimes, things are a jibe and a dig, and sometimes that's, their way. And I can't remember what I responded, but I remember her saying something to me like, well, that's something you can control. Just try going for a run. And all the advice over the years, have you tried keto? Have you tried paleo? And if you ever speak up for yourself, people will be like, oh, I'm worried about you. And yes, people may be worried about your physical health, but what about the mental and emotional toll that yo-yo dieting takes? And you don't know the story that goes on inside someone's head. Like, you make an insinuation about seeing their body. You don't know what happens behind the scenes. And I think with so many types of addictions, it can be quite hidden, but overeating is an addiction that can be worn for all to see. And also sometimes it's not necessarily overeating, there can be hormonal things. So I'm not saying blame it completely on that, but I have had issues with thyroid and PCOS and all things that are linked to being heavier set. So it is part of it, but people just assuming that you just don't care about yourself, or you don't even try. And a lot of the things that they say, it gets really hard.
So this was happening in Sydney, Australia. You grew up.
I grew up in Tasmania, actually, the little island down the bottom that often gets left off the map. So I grew up in Tasmania, and then I moved to Queensland, and then down to New South Wales. So I've moved around a bit, but not until I was an adult. This all happened in Tasmania.
So do you think the location being in Tasmania and Ireland, do you think that contributed it? Like, versus if you were to be based in Sydney, like big city, do you think that would have had different impact?
I don't know. That's such a fascinating question, because I've got children of my own now. And when I visit their school things, I remember visiting my daughter's swimming carnival very recently. And she, because that's another one I didn't even mention, the cross country, which is like the running race, the school carnival. I really tried, but I was slow. And I remember they were already packing up and like kids were getting on the bus and I was still racing. And I think in this current day, like now, they wouldn't do that for safety, security, and all these purposes. But back then, and so the reason I bring that up is my daughter was in the swimming carnival and she wasn't going very well. And I was there bracing, waiting for the jeers, like waiting for people to say things. And it was funny, the teacher and her best friend ran over to the side of the pool, was like, come on, Xanthi, you can do it. And when everyone else finished, they stayed in the pool, even though she wasn't even halfway across. And then when she finally got over the line, everybody in the stand stood up and clapped for her. And I was just, it was very healing for me. But I was like, I don't know. Like, I was wondering if it's just the times are changing, but it could also be the location. But then we did go back to Tasmania for a very short period of time. So my daughter was in school there. And there was a cross-country situation where the fit kids finished, and I saw them leave, and I was waiting for the big boy because I saw him at the beginning, and I was like, I just had flashbacks, like, to me being at the school, and I didn't see where they went. And anyway, when he finally broke the trees, they had circled around, like lapped around, and came across the finish line with him. And I just thought that was so beautiful that they, like, everybody finished. It wasn't just a matter of, well, we're done now, see you. So it was a very different experience and a very healing experience for me as an adult to witness that.
Yes. The reason why I asked the question is I was raised in a very small town, and then the bully was really bad. And then when I moved to a bigger town, it was bad, but I got bullied also. But then there was more choices. I felt like because we knew everybody, and then there was no escape. Once you're identified as a target of bullying, and then you just like can't escape because there's only like a few kids, like maybe like I think it was like a 50, 60 kids in the grade, where when you have like 400 kids in one grade, there's a completely different animal. Because even if you don't fit in this group, and if you're even getting bullied in this group, you can even like move to a different group. But then I didn't even have a choice because it was such a huge population. I literally grew up in like the village of 4,000 people. So I don't know if that kind of contributed. So that's kind of why I asked, because I don't know anything about Australia, and then the culture of bullying, and then prevention, etc. And then it's so crazy to me that the teacher make fun of you. The teacher made fun of you too, and there's so much bystanders. There's no upstanders in your situation. And then, how was your mental health situation? I know our generation, like we really lack there's resources and education growing up, not really talked about the mental health issues um, compared to after the global pandemic that everybody was depressed and isolated, that we have a lot more normalized talk about mental health globally. But then back then, we just didn't have the resources. So how did you describe your mental health stage growing up being bullied in Tasmania?
I would say in hindsight that I was depressed. It wasn't recognized. My father went to Vietnam, and I remember him saying, like, when people talked about mental health or mental illness, he's like, we didn't have that in my time. You just pulled yourself up by your bootstraps and got things done. Like, you guys are all pansies. And I remember, actually, there was a gentleman in the town we lived. It was also quite a small town. So that whole point that you brought to the front is something I had never considered, but probably a big contributor, because my kids do go to a big school now. But there was a gentleman, and he used to march and yell, and he held his walking stick like a rifle. And I didn't understand. I remember asking my mum about him once, and she said he had PTSD from the war. And I remember saying to my dad, not that long ago, you guys, not saying that they weren't strong and didn't do things, not downplaying what they went through at all, but they didn't have the facilities and the resources that we did now. We just ignored things. So it was just easy. I think it was easier too for my parents to be like, here, have some ice cream, here, have some chocolate, which added to the problem, because when I'm trying to speak up about what I'm going through and what I'm feeling, first you're being downplayed by, it's not that bad. Like, when I was your age, people were going to war and stuff, which, as I said, once again, I don't believe struggle is a competition. But sometimes when someone's coming to you saying they're having a hard time and you're trying to minimize it, it actually can exacerbate it. So I'd say growing up, I was definitely, depressed and self-medicating with food. And I remember at one stage I had a friend who used to cut, like physically self-harm, cut herself. And I'd look at her and I was like, why would she do that to herself? And it wasn't until like years later, after I'd eaten so much that I was literally wanting to vomit and feeling so uncomfortable, that I was like, aren't I doing the very same thing? Except her things are external, like she's cutting thing, but I'm eating so much that it hurts and I'm causing pain internally than you're seeing externally anyway. So I was like, it's the way to avoid, to shove down, to numb, to like, it was the same sort of thing in my way. And other people listening, you may not agree, and I'm not claiming to be an expert on this, but when I see, you know, ways that we act in ways that aren't serving to us, but in the moment they bring some relief. And like the biggest thing that I'm so thankful for, Juri, is that there wasn't social media and stuff like there is now when I was a child, because at least the bullying stopped once I got off the bus in the afternoon. Like, I don't know how I could have coped if I was being tagged in things, if photos were being taken. Like that one photo being published in the yearbook nearly broke me. And by then I was 20 years old. Imagine as a young child, like I don't know how, I can't imagine. And I'm just so thankful that I got the gift of not being the generation of that, because it stopped when I got home. I had reprieve on the weekend and the school holidays. Whereas kids now, people now, like as an adult, like I don't have the bullying now, but you can block and you can do that sort of stuff. But kids, they're in chat groups together. And as you said, they have friendship groups. And once they're targeted, people make fake accounts. Like when you're really trying to bully someone, blocking doesn't really let you get away from it. People are quite savvy with how they make their targets.
It's an amazing point about the cyberbullying. I unfortunately had to write an article about a presentator father who lost his son to bullying in the cyberbullying, to suicide when he was 13 years old. And the whole thing, he gave me the book, Ryan's Story, John Halligan. You can search. So John is an advocate for preventing the bullying and saying being bystander makes the bullying worse, because if there's an audience, and basically the bullying gets worse. And if there's only one upstander, somehow that could said, okay, hey, that's not okay. And I was like watching like Zendaya's interview that she was cursed by her parents because there was bullying in like middle school, that when she told her she told her parents, and then just when they asked what did you do, and nothing, so she got cursed because you could be upstander and not bystander. So it's so crazy to me that even medical school, the situation of the cake that you mentioned, that how the hell all these intelligent wanted to be a doctor, medical students, nobody noticed that it was wrong and they said anything. And that stuns me. That just like culturally amazes me. It just I was bullied, especially when I was like middle school, sixth grade, seventh grade, and also maybe eighth grade, and also at work as well. And then they gang up on you, and they just like keep doing things. And you're right about the social media, like it's just brutal, absolutely brutal. Even my adult life, even my current life, people say nastiest stuff. And I feel like they can say nastier stuff when it's texting than face to face. They don't have courage to say that. They just like text you like nastiest thing that you can think of. So you're right. So I know you were maybe depressed, and then how did your parents react to all this bullying?
My dad has always reacted to everything with physical. So he used to tell me just to hit them or punch them. And I've never been into physical things. But he'd just be like, you know, smack them in the mouth or punch them, they'll stop then. And my mum used to always just downplay it, and it wasn't so bad. And she'd actually get really mad at me because when I went to high school, we had a blazer which had to be dry cleaned. So that cost a lot of money. We didn't have a lot of money at school, and it was a big contention in my household because I was the youngest by a long shot. So I was the only one who got to go to a private school. My sisters all went to public, and they'd finished by the time I started school. But schools had changed a bit then, and my mum's like, where we live, the public school's a bit rough. I want to send Suzanne private, a bit sensitive. Anyway, part of the bullying too, they'd throw food at me or they'd smash cake on my blazer and say, are you hungry? And I remember, mum's busy and she's tired. I don't want to say sound parent blaming here, but she'd be like, oh, not again. We can't keep affording to dry clean this all the time. So I remember trying to take my blazer off when I got on the bus and shove it in my bag. So at least my uniform got dirty, and then I could wash that by hand because I only had the one. I only had the one dress, one jumper. And then put the blazer on to kind of cover it and then wipe it out. It was just a whole situation. And I remember, just mum was not available for it. She's just like, it's fine. Just, try not to be a target or whatever. Not that's very helpful. And my dad was just just hit everybody. And I remember speaking to teachers. It was funny. There was one time in year 12. So this was the last year of school before I went off to university. And I don't know how I'd angered this group. I was very smart, but I wouldn't say I was smart alecky, but I don't know. Somehow I'd angered this group. And they told me that they were going to meet me after school and bash me and all this sort of stuff. And I was so scared. And I remember going to the dean of the school, and I'd been to the teachers before in other things and had just been downplayed and ignored. He was on it. He had those students in the office and he had them threatened with suspension. And he said, if I hear anything about this again, you're expelled. And I was like, I had never had anyone take me seriously before. I'd never had anyone this is just not, I'm not available for this. And it was so lovely to have that model for me, that I was heard, that it was taken seriously, and that it was sorted. And they didn't dare come near me again because, a threatening of expulsion, especially, the final year of school. And it was that easy too to handle. I think, as you said, they play off each other, bullies, and who can have it worse, and oh, I'll get it in her hair or I'll get on her uniform, and then they laugh. And if you dare speak up or say anything, oh, we were just mucking around, you just can't take a joke. And it's not funny. The cake and stuff was annoying because it smeared and made a lot of mess. The fruit was worse because apples and stuff would hurt when they threw them at you, and I would bruise and stuff. But I do remember speaking to my parents about it again and again, but I just remember my mum was always busy and just I guess, I don't know if it brought back things from her own childhood. I don't know. Sometimes when I tell my story, especially about fat shaming and the things people said to me about my weight, so many people would say, oh, that never happened. It's just, I'm totally unavailable for this. And it's this is not a thing made up. This is not a story. This is what I experienced. So when someone downplays it by saying that had never happened, I think that's another thing. Sitting with somebody in their struggle is hard for many people because they can't imagine it.
Suzanne, thank you so much for telling this story. So since you shared a lot about bullying, in my book, A Gift from Adversity, I talked a little bit about one of the worst moments of my life where I was sexually abused by my dad, physically, sexually, emotionally, verbally, the whole shebang of the abuse, whatever you think of, in a situation where you just can't escape. And as you mature a little bit, then the sexual abuse gotten severe. And then I was mute, I just couldn't speak. And then I remember the whole week that I just could not talk. The word didn't come out. And then kids started to bully me, deaf. I remember a group of girls surrounding me and making fun of me that I'm mute, I'm deaf, I went crazy, whatever. And then I don't know, my mental health stage, I don't know, it would just like shut down. Like I just lost a function of being able to reply to people. I lost words completely. And on top of that, the bullying got worse. And I just didn't have capacity to even like process anything and like understand. But later on in my life, I kind of started to be able to talk, speak out. And then now I'm 46, I'm getting more, but we're going to talk a lot more about advocacy. And then, like you said, saying no to these things. But again, I'm so sorry that you have to go through that. And about the weight, did you find out if you had maybe a thyroid issues? I do have a thyroid issue. Like, did a doctor say anything?
I do have some thyroid issues and a family history, and I do also have polycystic ovary, which can be linked with more issues with weight. Um, but also, I would eat like, and I think you're thinking about the mental health and not having a support system or anybody to talk to at home. Food never told me off. Food never like food was always there. It was comforting. I felt better for a few moments. So like food really helped me get through it at the time. And then you reach a point in your life where something that was helpful in the past is actually maladaptive when you're in a different stage. So that was when more of the realization came that the reason diets and stuff weren't working for me was because I was eating when I wasn't hungry. Like I knew what to do, I just didn't do it.
Wow. So when you were getting bullied in Tasmania, like were there other students or kid who was suffering with that issue, getting bullied? Did you see any other kids who were getting bullied, or were you the only one that you could think of that you were getting completely targeted?
It was mostly me, and I was been reflecting on this, but when I saw someone else getting bullied, like pushed into the slide or the sand pit or teased, I would step in. So in hindsight, I was inadvertently, probably making myself more of a target then. But I've never been one who could stand back and watch somebody struggle. I've always been the one who has to step in. And I think, it's like, well, I can take it. Like it's not pleasant and I don't enjoy it, but I could take it and some people couldn't. Like I remember mostly I could hide the tears till I got home, and other people would be crying there. And I think when you step in, then the bullies get more interested in, well, what do we need to do to get this person to crack? And I did eventually, like, often, but people who kind of cracked too soon, so to speak, would lose their interest because then they're not getting the response. So yeah, there was a few other kids who were targeted a bit, but yeah, I couldn't stand by. And I remember one time it was kind of like an initiation. And, if you do this, you can be one of us. And I was just, no, like I've never wanted to be. I remember reading Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed. Have you read that? She talks about what she calls the shiny people, like the cool kids or, the ones. And I remember my chance to be a shiny person. And I was just like, no, like maybe I've always been a little bit of a loner or a little bit of a thing, but I couldn't stand by and watch someone else in pain or someone else suffer. So I guess I would shift the target to me.
Yes, unfortunately, sometimes when they create this one target and the one person, like in a school situation, again, especially in a smaller town, I would say, and then yeah, I just get that. And I just want to share a little bit of story of my friend who was bullied in the black community. She's black in America, but then she wrote an essay called "Racism Within Racism," and she was basically told, I think, whitewash because she didn't speak like black people. She spoke like white people, and she was pretty like intelligent. And then she I met her at college, but she was telling me that she was pushed from the stairs and she couldn't take a bus so because bullying was so bad. And her mom had to take her to school just to prevent the bullying from the bus. And it's just so crazy that, like, even if you are not heavy set, or just even like thin, like skinny, that they can target you, or how they talk. And, like, say this case of being like whitewash, that she was called, how they talk. And I had a guest from actually Perth, Australia, that he was targeted because he's was the only Asian, and he's a half Portuguese and then Chinese, but he was like completely targeted, and then that led him to addiction. So when you had this significant amount of the life of being bullied in adult life, Suzanne, how did it affect you, like now or like in adult life?
That's a great question. Because sometimes you don't know nature versus nurture. Like, I am a very introverted person. I'm very socially awkward, which people laugh at when because I run a program, I run a group, I do lots online. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm in my own house. I'm usually only talking to one person or a couple of people. It might be seen by lots, but I'm not on a stage or I'm not in front of lots of people. I really struggle to be in public areas around lots of people. And when my children first went to school, it was so hard for me. As soon as I walk back into a school and there's the smell, like the school smell, like, places have smells. The gym is one, the hospital is one, the school is one. It's just like, as soon as I was back in there, I remember my daughter's orientation, I did not want to be there. But fortunately, it's been quite a healing experience because I said they've had a very different experience, but also too, how much have I advocated and listened and been there? So that's a whole lot aside. But, public places, schools, or places where I've had bad experiences in the past have been harder for me to revisit. And just waiting, like, as I said, in my daughter's swimming carnival, waiting for the jeers. Or when my son, he has been recently diagnosed autistic, and thus far he's going to a regular stream school. I don't want to use an inappropriate term, but there's other schools for higher needs children. He's not attending one of those as yet. But when he's him, like full him, which I love and adore, I wait for the response for people. And mostly they're really good and really understanding. But there was one time that he had his nails polished and he had his little cape on, and some older boys came over and said something to him at the park. And he just turned and looked at them and said, "I think I look fabulous." And I just love that, because it didn't land for him. Like, that would have crushed me, and I was getting ready to, like, do I need to step in here? And because he wasn't a target, they just moved off, but I was there anyway. But it was funny. It was like, I don't care what you think of me. I think I look great. And I think that's the biggest thing that I didn't share is, I don't think anyone ever bullied me as much as I bullied myself. Like, I felt not good enough. I felt too big. I felt unworthy. I felt like I didn't deserve to take up space. And then I saw a lot of that. Whereas as I started to feel like, I'm as much self-worth as anyone else, it happens less. Or if someone says something, I don't necessarily to take it hard, or I just move from the space easier than I perhaps would have in the past. But mostly as an adult, groups, crowds, big things, or any sort of project, like let's go around the room, I'm thinking, let's not. So that's how it's affected me as an adult.
It kind of breaks my heart that you said you bullied yourself more than you get bullied. And can you describe a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I guess the language or the way you speak to yourself, like, if you make a mistake, it's like, you always do this. Or if you don't get the thing that you're trying for, it's because you're not good enough. Or there's something wrong with you. Nobody likes you. Just the language. I remember, I have a bit of salty language, but like, I'll tone it down a bit. But saying to myself, you're fat and lazy, and you don't really want this enough. And it's often reinforced in the media and in messages and in magazines and things that we see. But it's kind of like, they're using your words against you to try and usually sell you something. But it's like the way that you speak to yourself, like when you're lining up, they're doing the schoolyard pick for like the sport or the soccer or whatever, like nobody picks you for the soccer team. And, I imagine you're kind of looking down and feeling like this, well, no one's really can't make eye contact and go, hey, Suzanne. Whereas if we did something like that now, depending what it was, I'd be like, I'm keen, like I get picked because the affect is different. But the things you say to yourself inside your head, like you don't deserve this, or you're not worthy of this, or like the comparing and despair to other people who are doing it better, or things look better. Like I remember I wrote about this in my book. I painted a picture for class and then I put glitter on it and I was like super proud, and my dad took a photo and we printed it out, and I walked into class like, this is going to be great. And I remember some boys going, what'd you put photos on there for? Do you think you're a model? What's with all that glitter? How old are you? Like all that. And I just remember like kind of like leaning over my project, trying to cover up that I'd spent all weekend making this thing. And I think in hindsight, like sometimes we tear other people's things down because we feel inferior. Like a lot of people hadn't done anything, like literally come to school, they'd forgotten about the project, or they had a blank piece of paper with a couple of things written on there. So they're not tearing at mine because mine was this. They're tearing at mine because they felt something in themselves. But as a child, I didn't understand that. And I just like, oh, you're too over the top. You're too much. You're trying too hard. And then I became embarrassed by it. Whereas now I'd just be like, yeah, this is fabulous. Like my son just mirrored that so well. I think this is fabulous. And I was like, if you have that inside, that self-concept of like, of course mine's good, I'm enough, that you're not looking from it from other people, you resource yourself.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And a lot of times, like say my case is that I got bullied by my father mostly, and then the not only the physical sexual um abuse, but the verbal abuse was really, really, really horrible. Sometimes he called me like, you're trying to be a whore or you stupid. And that's my father. And my grandma was saying, I don't want to raise you. Like your mom, like who's bitch, like left you and I had no choice. You're not my priority. And then when you hear those things constantly, like your self-esteem just doesn't exist. It's not there. And then later on, like when I was 17, I became a model. And then right now I'm in major like motion picture. I've done a lot of modelings and sometimes even like I remember I wrote in my book when I was doing a musical, one of the lead character who did King for The King and I gave him a ride and then he was like, Juri, you are stunning, drop dead gorgeous. Like you're one of the most gorgeous person I've ever met. Yeah, you have the lowest self-esteem. Why? And I didn't really like understand what he said. Oh, and then I'm like, oh, maybe because my dad abused me. But not only that, it's just a subconscious thing that, like, when you're constantly getting this bullying, horrible words towards you, and then your self-image and the subconscious become like that, it's like the thickest wall that you cannot go over, and the images that you create, the beliefs that you put in, that's really truly not you. You cannot like jump over it.
I think that's such a powerful point. I wouldn't have even considered like, verbal abuse from my family, and in particular my dad, because that's just the way they are. I remember being called by my dad, buffalo butt, thunder thighs. I always had a big middle belly, so my sisters used to call my middle Miranda. They'd see Miranda before they saw Suzanne. Miranda the veranda, because I carried a spare tire around my middle, and all these things. And whenever I said like, this is making me uncomfortable or I don't like this, oh, it's just a joke. And it's just like, but it's not a joke to me. And I remember once, like when we first moved out of Tasmania up to Queensland, I'd lost a lot of weight for my wedding. And then I gained it all back and more. So I was literally twice the size, and I feared going home. Like, I wanted to see my family because I missed them, but I knew what would happen. And sure enough, when I did see them, hey, you've bunged on the lard. And it's just like the fear of going to things, like going to reunions or going to things we haven't seen people in a while, because there'll be the comments about your weight. And it's like, but then there's other people, because now I've dropped a lot of weight. I used to weigh twice what I do now, who, when I had the photos or when I was talking about it in my book, they're like, I never saw you that way. I just saw you. Like, whether, they just weren't aware of it. And the whole thing, that's like, you went through all this and you were my friend and I had no idea. And I think for anybody who's suffered bullying or abuse or something, some people witness it and can't cope, so just kind of block it out and don't realize it. And some people just don't see it because we become really good at masking it and hiding it. But like the fear of going home, or the fear of running into people I haven't seen in a long time because there'll be comments about my weight, is it's a thing. And even when I go to things now, like at the time of recording this, tomorrow we're going on holiday, taking my kids to the themes park. They're so keen to go on the roller coasters. But even to this stage, whenever I'm lining up, I'm always like, am I going to fit on this? Am I going to fit on this? I will fit on it easily, but my brain is still like, I'm going to get kicked off. I'm too big. Someone's going to say something, because that is the identity and the concept that you carry around for so long. And I remember being somewhere once and I must have been muttering it to myself. And the ride attendant's like, are you kidding? And I was like, no, I'm serious. But like, you might lose the physical weight or you might drop that, but your identity still can be, back in the past. And the things that do to others seem like verbal abuse or whatever, to you, they don't be, because that's just how it's been. And if you ever mention it or say, I very recently said to my dad something, he goes, it's just a joke. And I said, well, that's not funny to me. Like, if this happens again, the conversation will be over. I'll talk to you another day. But as a kid, you don't have that. You live at home. When you're under my roof, you do what I say. So it becomes an experience. And then, not realizing that is what you hear. So if somebody does say something good to you, it makes me think of the Tupperware Shapeos, where you put the toys in the Tupperware that the shape matches and you put them inside. Have you seen those? Yeah. So if you've only got the shape, the X shape, like a bully shape, that's all you literally are available for. So if somebody says something nice, you don't even register it because you're waiting for the other thing. And that's how your language is too. And you just become used to this.
It's interesting, the fear that you carry through even when you are an adult. That my fear is lunch. So while I got bullied over my lunch that my grandma was making, where other young moms were making this colorful lunch, and then my grandma was like more like a brownish, like a Japanese traditional food. And I got bullied so bad every day. And then I was like, to the point, like, I don't want to go to the cafeteria. I don't want to like open my lunch because people just make fun of my lunch. And then when I told my grandma, it was just a whole big drama that I'm not ever gonna make lunch for you, blah blah blah. And then she stopped making lunch when I was like 11, 12. So I had to stop waking up early and then start to make lunch for myself. And then when, interestingly, like when I was teaching like the summer camp or whatever, and then I had to make my own lunch, I was so scared to open my lunch. Like I made it, but like I just got so traumatized. And then I was in like 30s or whatever, then like, why am I scared? And I'm terrified completely. And then you just can't get over it. It's so sad. The bullying is so sad.
Yeah, I'm so sorry that happened. And it's because to you, it becomes an expectation or a memory or a wired way of being. And then to someone else, and also too, I think this is the thing about bullying that nobody really talks about. To you, to somebody else, that might not bother them. Like they might be like, oh, who cares? It's just lunch. So they can't relate to that. But we all have our things that to us are a really big deal. Like I remember if people ever made comments on my hair or whatever, I never cared. That doesn't bother me. But anything about my weight, just immediate thing. And so like if somebody commented on my lunch, like that's another thing. When you're bigger, you tend to not eat much around people because you're worried that they're going to comment, should you really be eating that, or have you tried this, or whatever. So you'd eat really light in front of people and then do drive-through or sneak eat food at the way home. And people would even sometimes say things like, I don't understand why you're so big, you eat like a bird, or this kind of thing, because you would be so paranoid to eat something around people who, but then again, skinny people have it too. Because I remember other people being like, well, just have a hamburger or just eat this. So I guess there's going to be things, and it's looking at, what is it in particular for you? Because I'm sure I've inadvertently commented on someone's hair or done something, but to them is a big deal. So I guess, we are villains in somebody's story, but we're not villains.
Well, thank you so much, Suzanne. So let's shift to the second question, which is the tools that you use to overcome your cases, this big issue about bullying, and then weight. So this part of the podcast, I cherish it, and then I really appreciate all of my guests today. Is episode 89, almost going towards 100 episodes, and then each guest that came from all over the world had shared very unique tools. And then my hope is that this part of the podcast can really change somebody's lives. So, what was the tool, or what are the tools that you used that truly worked and shifted for you?
One of the simplest tools is journaling. Like, I call it just like a brain dump. Just getting it out of my head and onto the page, because we have a shower for our physical body like every day, or hopefully we do. And journaling is like a mental shower. So it's because the thing is, when it's in your head, you can almost gaslight yourself. Oh, it's not that bad. I'll just think positive thoughts. I'll just ignore it or whatever. But when you get it out onto the page, then you can kind of step back and dissociate from it and go like, not from a place of judgment, because you've already been judged enough by yourself or by others, but from a place of observation. It's like, wow. And when you first start to do it, it can be really challenging, because it's like the thoughts can be like cockroaches in your mind. You shine a light on them and they want to scuttle away. So the resistance, it's the tool that I find the most valuable. But to this day, the tool I resist the most, because especially if I am on like a downward spiral, because that's the thing too, healing happens, but there's other layers. It's like an onion. It's not like, now my life's amazing. That's the Disney princess movie. Like, there are times where the things happen. And in the past, when I turned back to food, because food is another one. Food is the one that I had growing up. It was maladaptive. It resulted in me being really big. But in the moment, it helped. So as an adult, I used to spend so many years thinking I was broken, or thinking like, why can't you just get it together? Why can't you just eat differently? But now I actually see that. Like, I love how your podcast, your show, your book, The Gift in Adversity, when I start going back to food now, and very recently I have, so this is it's a challenging time to share this, but instead of getting down on myself or blaming myself, it's like, where am I not looking after myself? Like, what needs aren't being met? What am I not addressing here? Like, it's like a traffic light sign that something is amiss. It's not a cue to freak out, or that I'm going to get big again, or that I can't, that I'm a hypocrite. It's like, hang on, there's something here. So I think, when we have a maladaptive behavior and we start practicing it again, so the system I have now, another tool that I have is, I call it the traffic lights. So the green light is when everything's going good, life's wonderful. And the red light is when knee deep in chocolate and wondering what happened. What are the orange lights? So when I start to purchase things for the kids, like when I go to the shop and I'm like, I'll get this for the kids, I really know it's for me. Or when I start going shopping when I'm hungry, like, that is the most dangerous time. I never grocery shop when I'm hungry. I'll come home with the entire aisle of stuff. So it's like, these are the signs that are like, hang on, something needs to change here. So, you're not looking after yourself, rather than looking for the next program, the next coach, the next podcast to fix me, because I'm not broken. And then remembering that the experiences that I've had, like I can tend to, as the human brain does, default to the negative. Like, there's also been positive experience I've had. So in my mind, it's like I've got my Tupperware thing, and I'm building the receptors for the positive and starting to take on positive feedback. So I know a lot of people talk about gratitude, and I've never actually successfully had a gratitude practice, because as soon as I hear the word, I can literally hear my mum when I was a child, you should be grateful, there's starving children in Africa. So Africa, gratitude is a really loaded term for me. So instead, I've got a word allergy. Appreciation. It's basically the same thing. But when I say I appreciate things, it doesn't feel loaded, it doesn't feel heavy. And I can appreciate even the small things. Like as I was coming in to record this, my son jumped in the doorway and he's like, hug trap. And I was just thinking that's something I'll write down tonight. I appreciate how he just hides around corners and has the hug trap. Like, I appreciate that. I appreciate the being asked to speak on podcasts like this and shows and share. And if one person hears this and feels less alone, or what I get from this too, from sharing the story, like that thing you brought to light for me about the small school, the small space. I had never considered that before, and that probably is a big contributing factor. But like the healing doesn't happen once. It's something that happens again and again and again. And we can get activated. I don't like the term triggered, activated again. But instead of freaking out when I get activated, it's like, what else is ready to heal now that wasn't ready before?
It's very interesting. And then thank you so much for crediting that about the podcasts, coming to this podcast and then discovering something. And then I just want to let you know that the reason why I mentioned about the small town versus the big town, or the cultural shift or cyber shift, and then the awareness and preventions and all that stuff. And I think the tools that we can use as an adult, and then as the people that we um, went through the adversity of our common cases bullying. Um, my kids got bullied heavily, really bad, like racial thing. Like, what are you two brownies doing here when we went to swimming pool? Or black monkey negro. Like, they are mixed race. I got bullied. I got discriminated. Like, can you speak English? Like, that's why you don't have boyfriend. Like, I don't know. It's just like people discredit me because I'm Asian female. Like, these things happen. But then my tools being is practicing the counter dialogue with my kids. So we do like role play. And then my son's getting really good at it. And then we kind of like really started to like come up with the plan, A, B, C, D, E, like you know what to say. And just to let you know that bullying comes in a form in adult life is like abuse as well, like verbal abuse and domestic violence included. And it gets really, really serious because, like you said, people get sophisticated in bullying, and the police gets involved, court gets involved. It's ugly. But then I think you really have to be smarter, outsmart these people, and then really come up with the plan and advocacy program. As a journalist myself, I have had advocated many difficult situations, and stemming from the bullying and stemming from targeted to the weak. But then also, like, one time I was talking to my son, he was called "Are you stupid?" And he's like distinguished. He's like high honor. He does like modeling and the movie and everything. There's no way he's stupid. And then he told me, "Mommy, like next time, like I was." Oh, he said to the kid because he kept bullying him in the bus. He said, "Oh, I just told that you know guy. I just told that kid. Oh, are you talking to me or are you talking to yourself?" And I thought it was brilliant. And then those are the moments. And now myself, if somebody bullies me on a movie set or a professional situation, I learned how to write email and then send it to the right people. And I've seen the people who I reported get fired. And I've seen people who value my concerns and I bring attention. And then I was in a situation where I became upstandard. And I'm not a mandatory reporter, but I'm really getting stronger and then good at identifying what's right, what's wrong. And even like a group situation, I'm the only one who's not laughing. Like you say jokes, but then jokes is two-way streets. You have to agree that it's funny, but if one person, like you said, if that person does not if that person does not agree with you, that he or she doesn't think it's funny, and that's not a joke, and that becomes like offense, that becomes verbal abuse, and the people has to start to recognize these things. So how do you think that Australia, like I don't know about the culture in Australia, do you think it's changing? Like you mentioned about your children and then their peers getting more kind of supportive in a way. But then do you think the system itself, society itself, is having a more understanding about bullying and prevention standpoint of it? Is there legislature? Is there any law bills that signed to prevent these things?
Not that I know of. Australia in general is just kind of got a long way to come in that regard because we have, oh, she'll be right, mate. Oh, it's just a joke. Oh, you're too sensitive. Oh, you're too soft, copper. Like it's the way. There is a lot that needs to change there, but there are people who are really starting to speak up about it, like Grace Tame being one of them. And I think that it takes a lot to be that one who stands up and says, "Well, I don't find it funny," and hold that, especially when you're in the beginning the lone voice. Like I remember when that happened to me at medical school, going to the year coordinator and saying, "What is this?" Like I literally took, like I'd never bought the yearbook before. I'm not that kind of person. I don't go to the parties. I don't do this. That was the one thing I went to. Um, I took it out of the library because I hadn't purchased it. I remember it beeping and the librarian running after me, and I'm just marching down the year's coordinator's room, and I'm like, I'm not happy with this. And them making the people come and apologize to me. But they only did it because they were made. And they were just like, "Oh, we just thought it was a joke." So it's like, what kind of apology is this? A forced one that they're just like, they're not seeing how much I was upset by this. They were like, you just don't have a sense of humor. And in some areas, it's getting better, like certainly things, racial slurs and stuff. There have been a few incidences in sport where people have been really taken to task and it has gone to appropriations and things. But in other areas, like gender and weight and appearance, not so much as yet that I've seen. But yeah, it just takes the people to stand up. And often you don't want to stand up because you don't want to bring any more attention to it. You just want it to be over with. I think, the reason that I did stand up a little with that thing was because it was in a published publication that, it was available in the library. Like it's probably still there. I don't know, it might even be online now. It's like people are going to see that. My kids could see that, but often it doesn't, there can't be repercussions for something that somebody said because it becomes a she said, or their word against theirs and the lone voice against the crowd. It's like, oh, they just didn't understand me. And I've said to a number of people over the years now, I did understand you. I just don't find it funny. And then they either just still don't think that I got it, or it's interesting to look at the response when I do say it. It's like, yeah, I understand you. I'm just not amused.
I think the legal standpoint, the Suzanne, if I were you, like you never asked for media release, you never asked for the permission, so that's against the law. You violated my permission, and then release. Like I never signed the media release. and what is going on in here. Like they could completely like burn the resources and then just, you know, republish or um erase, delete. Like, if I were you, like if my kids got targeted like that, I would go all the way to state house. I would go all the way to publication company and I would like destroy everything. Like I would say my kids never signed a media release. If you published without my consent, I would think that's inappropriate to make fun of my weight, make fun of me, or make fun of my daughter, make fun of my son. I would not tolerate this. And you committed a crime, violated the human rights, and like I would just go crazy. Like my daughter was choked 4 times, like in the kindergarten. I called the police. I emailed, and I said this is a third-degree felony charge. If somebody comes to me on the street and it chokes me, that guy will go to jail. Why are you doing that? Like, why do you think this is okay? It's the fourth time. But sometimes bringing the legal terms, doing the research, what the consequences and what kind of human rights you have, and eloquently elaborate to the right person in charge, that can really change. And I learned that advocacy service through my journalism and being a TV and film producer as well. Because some of the cases, for instance, like I go to the school, and then some of the kids didn't sign the media release, therefore I was not able to publish that specific photo because some of the children are involved with the Department of Children and Family, and they don't have the release. So we have to navigate, and we have to get permission from the principal. And this is not even making fun of. This is just like patriots visiting the new NFL player visiting the school for like reading program. And even then, school is very careful with that. So I'm surprised that, they allow that. So I feel like as a person, as a parent, we always have a legal rights and then we always have advocacy. And I feel that not some people speak out in a way using the legal terms. And then when you come down on the legal term like that, like say the Black Monkey Negro is a hate crime, and I told the principal, I'm a journalist. If I go to White House and if I address the president, Barack Obama, Black Monkey Negro, first of all, I'll go to jail. It's a hate crime, and I will lose the job. And why are you demanding my son to do peer to peer? And then he's like, oh, he has to learn how to share space. No, it's a crime. You don't share a space, that person would go to jail. Period. I changed the school. Because if you need to understand there's a law, nobody's above the law, and if the system leader is not comprehending the rights, we just have to change the space or even move. And that's another solution. That you always have a power, you always have a choice. If the system is broken, there's a place always the system is working, and you have advocacy and you have the support. And then you always forget when you are in the middle of the bullying. That's my case. Like I escaped from my dad when I was 13. And I don't know how the hell I did that. But you always have to like survive.
I love that. And I love the way that you spoke to that, because I do remember after I spoke to the person going to the board and stuff and sending letters and just hearing nothing in return and sending a number of them. But, how I'd handle it differently now, maybe if I go and visit again, I will go into the library and demand that it gets removed because, as you said, I never gave permission. And it's funny, my daughter recently went to a school thing. Anyway, they had the photo out and I was showing my sister and she was like, why have so many children got their back turned? And I said, because their parents haven't given permission for them to be photographed, and it was easier to keep them all in one group. So instead of having, some children, well, you've got to get out. But for that very reason that you just said, like there could be, we don't know what's going on and their parents haven't given permission. So, and every year having to sign the permission. And I just love that because, yes, I'm happy for my child to be photographed, but I understand there are other people who don't, and that is met and respected and encouraged. And yeah, it's totally a thing.
Well, thank you so much, Suzanne, for having this conversation. It's very important. And as a mom, as a parent, and as an adult who experienced this significant amount of mental health effect, and then how it's leading to adulthood, like it's not just a small incident, it's lifelong, lasting negative impact of your self-image, and then life decisions and how you move in the society. And nobody understands like how bad it is, that it's going to have a life lasting impact.
100%. Yeah, thank you.
So let's move to the last question, which is a gift that came from your adversity. So how would you say a gift that came from your adversity?
That it stops with me. Like generationally in my family, I think we've tended to be the people pleasers or the doormats or the yes people. And when you do start to set boundaries and say no, people are not pleased necessarily because they might feel inconvenienced or they might feel that you're targeting them or they might feel, any sorts of things like that. But I see my children standing up for themselves. Like, well, I think I look fabulous, end of story. Or like, why would you want to go on a diet? I like chocolate. Or like just having so much healthier relationships with not only me and their father, but themselves. And then the ability to ask for the help and know that mum will have their back, but not so that they can not take responsibility for their actions or whatever, but like that they have that soft place to land and to come home and to talk about what happened. It was funny, not funny, but my daughter had a nightmare recently and she came in at like 3 a.m. and telling me about it. And I was like, well, just get into bed. You can sleep here. It's fine. We'll talk about it tomorrow. She's like, oh no, I really want to talk about it now. I'm like, life coaching at 3 a.m. So the gift is like that ability to speak what's happening and identify what is acceptable, what isn't acceptable, and actually communicate my needs to others while also being mindful that my experience hasn't been their experience. But that doesn't mean that I need to discount my own. Like sometimes when I speak to my sisters or we have different recollections of an event, instead of making it mean that I was wrong or whatever, it's like I saw it differently or I experienced differently. Like there is 17 years between my oldest sister and me. So she was an adult for things that I experienced as a child. And it's like, we are each different. I think the gift in bullying, it's like, and also too, I can see places where people come to me with things where I didn't even realize I might have been seen as bullying them. Like, sometimes if I'm impatient or if I'm not focused, like I'm focusing on something. So as a result of that, being clearer with the discussion. So an example I can think of is one time my son just said completely offhand, you love your phone more than me. And I was really heartbroken. And I remember I sat my phone down and I spoke to him about it. And I realized as a result of that, like I was responsive to emails and notifications and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, I wasn't being present with him. Like I was there physically, but I was with my phone. So now I deleted email off my phone and the apps and stuff. And yes, I still use them, but like when I'm working now. When I'm here. And when I'm with my kids, I'm with my kids. I'm not trying to do many things at once. And I think sometimes when we are trying to please everybody or tick all the boxes, then we don't stay in touch with ourselves. So it's kind of like being really clear on, I'm working, mumming or playing, or we're doing family time, or I'm just also having my own time to just do whatever it is that I like, instead of being always at, like the beck and call, whether it be email or notifications or, kids, mum, 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 mum. So having good, clear boundaries with myself and my family, and then modeling that for others, that it's okay to say no. And also, no doesn't necessarily mean that I don't like the person or whatever. And no doesn't mean no forever. It could just be no, not today. Or thank you so much for inviting me. See a movie in the past, if someone said, do you want to go and see this? I would just go, even if I wasn't interested. But saying, actually, thank you so much for inviting me. I don't really enjoy sci-fi. Is there anything else showing? Because what am I wanting? To spend time with the person. And so, the outlet doesn't matter so much, but most people are accommodating or open to, like, well, actually, let's find something that's mutual. Doing something with other people doesn't mean that I have to do something that I don't enjoy. And I think I wouldn't have been really as clear on that if I hadn't had the experiences that I have.
Thank you so much, Suzanne, for coming into A Gift from Adversity. Before you go, if there's somebody who's listening to this podcast who's getting bullied right now, what's your biggest advice that you can give to that person?
My biggest advice would be to find someone to share, like to speak with. However, choose your audience. So, like, say, for example, if it was me right now, I know that my parents wouldn't be the people I'd go to, because they're incapable of holding that space. And if you don't have anybody in your life, as in a family member or a friend, there are so many hotlines, there are so many services, there are so many things available, free and paid, but your experience is valid. And if there isn't anybody in your immediately circle who can validate that for you, or hear or hold space, then you can find somebody who will. And know that, you're not alone, and you're not the only one, and your chances are you're not overreacting. But finding that person who can listen and hold space and sit with you for this, rather than downplay it or dismiss it, is invaluable.
I love what you said about don't go to the people who are incapable of holding a space for you. And whether it's parents or siblings, and again, like they're not your counselor, or they don't have emotional intelligence to hold a space for you. You're so right. And I just completely understand choosing the audience part of it. And then unfortunately, when you're getting bullied, it's so much happening in your brain at the same time. You really have to choose who you share with, so you don't get second or third shock wave, which I have gotten it multiple times, and it sucks. So you are 100% right. Really protect yourself. But thank you so much for sharing this experience and having this vulnerable conversation with us, and really bringing this difficult conversation to forefront, and bringing more awareness to our generation and then to our next generation. Thank you so much again for coming to A Gift from Adversity.
Thank you so much for having me.